Greetings, students. Mr. Little here. And today we're going to take a look at a document, and we're going to practice our HIPP statements. Some of you might know these as CAP statements or HIPP-O statements, but it's the same thing. Here we have a document that works with Chapter 23, Chapter 24, and we're going to have a look at this. Let's give it a read through. Okay. First things first, want to look at the source. It's a letter written by Elizabeth Springs. That's a very English-sounding name. An indentured servant in the colony of Maryland to her father. Okay, I can't imagine she's going to be talking about nice things. Indentured servitude's lives were pretty hard. Honored father, oh dear father, believe me what I'm going to be late. Believe me what I'm going to be late. The words of truth and sincerity. Balance my former bad conduct to my suffering here, then I am sure you will pity your distressed daughter. Your distressed daughter. This is written in Old English. What we fortunate English people suffer here is beyond the probability of you to conceive. I am one of an unhappy number, and toiling almost day and night, and very often in the horse's drudgery, scarce anything but Indian corn and salt to eat, that even begrudged, nay, many Negroes are better used. Oh my. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So it looks like this is a plea to her father to assist her. Balance my former conduct and my suffering here. You will pity your daughter. Former bad conduct. I wonder if she was sent in as an indentured servitude for a punishment. An unhappy number. Yes, we should recall that indentured servitude was very common in the 13 colonies. And this appears to come from Maryland. So, nay, many Negroes are better used. So this seems to be someone who maybe works with slaves, so perhaps on a plantation. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary in Maryland. It was not quite the Deep South, but they had plantations. Okay, let's break down this HIPP statement. So let's start with context, which I think a lot of kids find context the easiest, so let's wipe it out first. Historical context. So this is written in the 1750s. And so for context, indentured servitude, which is being discussed here, was a major form of labor in the American colonies. There were a number of reasons for this. England had a very large urban population that it was very easy to find people to come work in the colonies. You could pay them, or you could get them to sign contracts to come do work. Sometimes not of their own free will. There were also prisoners who were sometimes sent. And, this is in part because of the rise of cash crop plantations. And if this is Maryland, it's probably a tobacco plantation, if it's a tobacco plantation, or if it is a plantation at all. Other contexts that you could talk about might be this person seems to be claiming that this condition is unbearable. So perhaps this person is also familiar with Enlightenment ideas. Not out of the question. I mean, if she can write, she may have some kind of education. So perhaps it would be important to keep the Enlightenment in mind, although I don't think that would necessarily come into play here. What about the intended audience? Well, you might look at the letter and say, well, it's written to her father. Very clearly, intended audience is her father. Okay, who is her father? Well, it probably sounds like her father is probably an English individual, perhaps upper class or a wealthy individual. I would feel like a poor person wouldn't bother to write their family unless their family could do something about it. And I just have a feeling kind of looking at this that, perhaps this person's father must have some sort of connections and also be able to read. Again, if you can read, you've got some time, you've got some education. So perhaps the intended audience would be English individuals, more wealthy than her, may be able to assist her in her plight, because it does sound like she's asking for something, some kind of help. So her father, yes, but perhaps in general, individuals, upper class and more wealthy people who may be able to assist her in her plight. What's the point of view? Well, she's clearly an indentured servant. So she has the view of an indentured servant, and she works alongside slaves. But who is an indentured servant? Well, usually an indentured servant is someone of poor means, or someone who's seeking to escape a bad life in the Americas, and they're willing to sell their labor for 7 years to try to get that good life. But what's more interesting, I think, here is that she's actually a woman, a female indentured servitude. And it seems like, reading between the lines, it sounds like her father may have intentionally sent her here. My former bad conduct, maybe it wasn't up to him. Maybe she committed a crime. But it sounds like something to keep in mind is that this is a woman who didn't have control over her freedom. And that was something fairly common. Women didn't have control over their labor. Women didn't have control over their property in most parts of the English-speaking world at this time. And so it's important to keep in mind this point of view. She is an indentured servant. She's also a woman, though, right? So that's an important part of the point of view to keep in mind. What is the purpose of this? Well, it seems like initially she's just asking her father for something. But perhaps the wider purpose, the wider action she wishes to achieve is to draw attention to the plight of her working conditions. Perhaps she's demanding some sort of reform to the indentured servitude system, although if she's upper class, probably not. She might benefit from it. It's hard to say what she wants outside of some sort of relief from her father. But perhaps she is really the only reason I think she might be trying to draw attention to the conditions of indentured servitude is because she compares it to slavery. She says, slaves are treated better than we are, right? It's a very dramatic thing to say. Not necessarily untrue, by the way. Indentured servants were sometimes routinely treated worse than slaves because indentured servants were not property. And you need to treat your property nicely. That is not to say slaves were treated nicely, but indentured servants also had a special sort of hatred doled at them. So perhaps her purpose is to draw attention to a wider reform movement for indentured servitude. Honestly, this document doesn't seem like it's the best for doing a purpose HIPP statement, but you always have to think when you're doing these, which of the four lens of analysis is the one that you want to do. And keep in mind that this is just my analysis. When I ran through it, this is what I thought. It's possible you saw something I didn't, and therefore you might analyze it slightly differently. But this is just an example to help you think about other examples in the future. I want to thank you for watching me. Please, if you need any assistance, reach out to me. And my name is Mr. Little, and I will see you next time.